Welcome, everybody, to the Planning Commission meeting for May 26, 2022. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All right, Katie, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Matusek,
Here.
Commissioner Bates,
Present.
Commissioner Moritz,
Here.
Commissioner Bennett,
Yes,
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Knopf,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Second item, I guess, on our agenda is to thank our former chair, Daryl Johnson, who's here tonight. Thank you for not only your 8 years of service on this panel commission, but your 7 years before that on the design review committee. I just learned that tonight. A long run. And I can tell everyone here who doesn't know, this is tonight's folder, which is light. As these have gone, this is one of the less contentious, but you sat in this chair on this side of the table through some very long and important pieces of, what would you say? Not legislation, but actions in this city, and we're the chair through many of those. So thank you. Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl. Daryl, from a staff perspective too, great person to work with as a chair. You are always, here on time. You're studying way beforehand, and always, a great open, asking any questions prior, and really enjoyed working with you for the time I got to work with you. So a small certificate there of appreciation, but we really do appreciate what you have, the service you give in this.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking here at the certificate, and it has Daryl Johnson. When I started with the design review board, I was Hank. and then it took all the people in the city here a long time to change over from Hank to Daryl. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to say, it was actually a lot of fun being chairman and running the boards. You learn a lot of stuff. You learn a lot of stuff about how to read people, how they're going to be voting. All those sort of things are subtle indications of what's going on, and so it was a learning process, which was great. And I think all of you know that if you've been on these boards. And one of the big setbacks, I think, was having the virus so that you didn't have the people here firsthand. That makes a huge difference in how the chairman runs the place by having to use the technology that we do. So good luck.
Daryl came in and said he didn't recognize me because I wasn't on Zoom and I didn't have the rock behind me.
That's right. For the rock.
And I want everyone to know that Barb has already started recruiting him for other.
Yeah. Thank you again. Let's move to consideration of the minutes from our April 28th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes? If there are no amendments to the minutes, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Oh, sorry.
We have plenty of seconds. Any discussion? Then Katie, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bennett,
yes,
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Knopf,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Our next item is a legislative matter. This is a public hearing and consideration of the 22-01 adoption of the Cannon Beach Transportation System Plan, TSP, as supporting material to the comprehensive plan, CP 22-01. Jeff Adams, on behalf of the City of Cannon Beach, seeks the adoption of the Cannon Beach Transportation System Plan as supporting material to the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan. The TSP is in accordance with the Oregon Revised Statutes OAR 660, Division 12, Transportation Planning Rule, which implements statewide Planning Goal 12. The request will be reviewed against the criteria of the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan and Municipal Code, Section 17.86.070.a, Amendments Criteria. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe that he or she has a conflict of interest or a personal bias? May we have the staff report, please?
Yes, so I just want to kick it off, and I want to read something. I don't usually like to read much, but I do want to read that the background for this and just a paragraph we used in the actual application to plan this. It said the city of Cannon Beach, birthplace of Oregon's public coast and one of the state's top 10 tourist attraction, remains without a transportation system plan. Adoption of a TSP will provide city leaders objective and cutting edge scenarios and solutions as the city strives to maintain its regulation as one of America's most beautiful and unique coastal destinations while providing its citizens a safe and resilient framework for growth and development. Cannon Beach is unique in that it sits at the nexus of three major forces: a growing global and regional tourist economy fueled by metropolitan growth, a sensitive and precipitous geologic, geographic, and topographically limited footprint, as well as an increasing threat of climate change, which, when coupled with the looming presence and preparation for an impending Cascadian event, produces one of the most challenging long-range planning horizons for any community. And so the objectives of the Cannon Beach TSP in that application would be to identify, map, assess existing transportation, transit, mobility, and parking facilities, to prepare the city for emergent events and their potential impacts. 3, encourage innovative solutions to the unique challenges of a tourist-dependent community. 4, create channels for continued community engagement and transportation planning. And 5, build resilient systems that can better cope and respond to the fluctuations of global and regional markets for emergent and impending events. And so just to briefly, Eddie will go over the kind of run through of the where we're at and some of the feedback that we had from the work session. He'd like to, the memo that we sent out. And so what it talks about is the engagement process that we went through, and then talks about the different levels of the plan, and then the implementation strategies, and then the menu of selections that are out there. And so then you will have a chance to hear from the public. We have had public comment as well. You can always go to cannonbeachtsp.com. I would love to have $1 for every time I've said that over the last 2 years. But cannonbeachtsp.com. And if you go to the project library, that's all the materials that have been uploaded, including all the background materials with the surveys, all the background material for the technical bulletins. But also, then if you go to the public comments page, then you can also see all of the public comments that have been provided. And I'll note that on those project library, they have the summary raw data, the survey raw data, and in that's a lot of public comment as well. So if you haven't been there, you'd like to still see that, and you haven't been involved, there's still opportunity. This is a recommending body. You'll be recommending this to the city council. So there'll still be, as Eddie will go over the timeline going forward, we did notice for next, because of the state requirements, we did notice the next available public meeting in case you guys wanted to approve it. It is noticed to go forward to the city council, but you're in no way obligated to have to do that. And so Eddie will touch on that, and then the other things going forward. And so staff recommends, of course, approval with any conditions that you may or amendments that you may have going forward. And just wanted to pass it over to Eddie now, and you can take it away. And I think, let me see if I need to let you share it, Eddie, or do you have the shareable?
Yeah, it looks like I'm able to share. So let me
Okay.
start that process really quick, and y'all can let me know if you can see it. Just 1 second. All right, is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I suppose I'll launch right in. So my name is Eddie Montejo. I'm a transportation planner at Parametrics, and I'm here today with my colleague Ryan Farncombe to share the latest and greatest regarding the transportation system plan. So we had an opportunity to talk to you all a couple of weeks ago where we laid out a lot of the substantive recommendations in the TSP. And today I'll just be providing a quick overview of what the plan is. And I'll also touch on some of the points that were discussed during the last Joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting. The presentation will be brief, and the intent there is to really have our team act as a resource to answer questions or to clarify some of the content within the TSP, but really to let the Planning Commission hash this out, as it's your community and we think it's most appropriate for you all to really lead the discussion. So I'll try to keep it brief. And if any questions come up during the presentation, please feel free to chime in. Jeff, is there anything else preamble-wise before I can just get into it?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay. So most of this is going to be repeat information for you all, but just to touch on the high level of what the TSP is and what we're talking about. So as you all know, a TSP is really intended to address transportation needs within the city of Cannon Beach today, but then also looking into the future and trying to predict what how the transportation system will operate over a 20-year planning horizon. It's also comprehensive in the sense that it tries to identify opportunities and potential solutions for all modes of transportation within the city. So that includes everything from walking, biking, driving, parking, public transit, and freight. The real practical element of the TSP, or of any TSP within the state of Oregon, essentially boils down to preferred alternatives for identified transportation issues within the city, as well as broader programs for transportation improvements over time, policies that the city can adopt as a compendium to the existing comprehensive plan, and then also transportation standards to help guide development over the next 20 years. Another really important facet of the transportation system plan, in addition to those programs, projects, and policies, is that it includes funding options and an implementation strategy that provide the city with a framework for how they could proceed actually developing improvements as opportunities arise and as funding is obtained. And notably, like Jeff mentioned, this is Cannon Beach's first TSP. It's really been a pleasure for our team to work with your community to develop this plan. And it's really no small feat for any community to develop this kind of forward-thinking policy document. So congratulations to you all for getting this far. In addition, the sort of philosophical center of what we've been trying to do with this TSP and in our work with Jeff and rest of city staff is trying to focus on the specific needs of Cannon Beach. There are other TSP documents out there that are a little bit more generic, but the geographic, economic, and transportation system within Cannon Beach is so unique that we really needed to tailor the solutions to something that was very appropriate for the local context, and that we thought preserved the things that made Cannon Beach special for most of the residents, which is that village feel and small coastal community feel. In addition to that, we also recognize the ongoing impacts of tourism. Like Jeff mentioned, it's one of the top tourist destinations in Oregon, and we need to be real about addressing those impacts in a way that's strategic, cost-effective, and also balances the needs of the folks that actually live here, that actually live in Cannon Beach year-round. In addition, one of the key motivations of the TSP is addressing the fact that there are a lack of safe and comfortable pedestrian and bicycle connections throughout town. We recognize that this is again, a village, and urban style improvements such as sidewalks and bicycle lanes on the street are not necessarily appropriate. So we worked hard with staff, with our internal technical teams, and then also soliciting feedback from the community to try to identify solutions that were effective, We're cost effective, and we're also more consistent with the local feel. And last but not least, one of the other key opportunities, again, recognizing the unique geographic location of Cannon Beach, was trying to identify co-benefits in the sense of linking together opportunities for improving bicycle and pedestrian connections with the city's evacuation points and assembly areas. I also wanted to touch briefly on the decision-making framework for this project, just to make sure it's clear especially for members of the public. So first and foremost, we've been collecting public feedback and stakeholder feedback throughout every level of this project. Starting all the way up at the project management team, Jeff has taken on dozens of one-on-one and in-person meetings to meet with local community members, hear out their concerns and needs, and try to address those in a way that's meaningful and reflected in the plan. In addition to that, there was the project advisory committee consisting of local stakeholders and professionals that provided key insight into the refinement of our technical work and ultimately approved that work as we move forward throughout the process. Where we are today is the Cannon Beach Planning Commission, whose principal role is to recommend whether or not to adopt the transportation system plan. And ultimately, of course, the Cannon Beach City Council will decide whether or not to adopt. And again, the takeaway with this is just that we've really tried to be as cognizant as we possibly can, especially in the context of the ongoing pandemic, which made it harder to talk to people. But we've really tried to incorporate community feedback at all levels of the project, and we're continuing to do that today. In terms of schedule, we're really at the tail end of the project here. So spring, summer of 2022 is really reserved for the public hearings, planning commission meetings like today, and ultimately city council adoption meetings. Community engagement, we heard from the Joint Planning Commission and city council meeting was clearly an important element to clarify once again in terms of what we've accomplished throughout this project. So this has been a very comprehensive and robust community engagement program. Of course, we can't talk to everybody despite our best efforts, especially because of the pandemic, but I do think that we've done a really great job trying to meaningfully incorporate public feedback and talk to as many people as possible. So we started in the summer of 2021, focusing on the goals and needs of the project. So before we ever got around to actually identifying potential solutions or project recommendations, policies, et cetera, it was really about understanding the existing conditions and the existing operations of the transportation system in Cannon Beach, and then using some technical tools and local knowledge to predict or to forecast how those conditions would persist over time and what the likely priorities of the community would be. So this first milestone included our first project advisory committee. We also had a public Zoom webinar that was open to the entire community, which is really essentially just an online meeting to answer questions and talk directly with community members. We also did an online open house that was open for over a month, which solicited community feedback on the goals and needs within Cannon Beach's transportation system. And based on that feedback, we heard a lot about parking, probably surely unsurprising to you all. So we had some resource in the project that allowed us to actually go back and do an additional parking survey to collect more granular data on parking needs and opportunities within the city. So we launched that July 12th and closed it up on July 27th, incorporated that into our big picture regarding existing and future conditions. Milestone 2 was in the fall of last year. This milestone is really focused on developing those initial ideas to address the transportation needs within the city, and also gathering public feedback on those draft alternatives. So I won't go through all of this, but basically we did another round of each of these meetings, including the PAC meeting, the webinar, the open house, and we also recognized an opportunity to try to reach the Spanish-speaking population within Cannon Beach. So we actually translated the online open house to Spanish using a community-based organization in Contact. So thanks to Jeff for doing that, and launched that in November. We also had our first joint planning commission and city council workshop in November, where we had really our first opportunity to share all the work done to date with the planning commission and city council, and to essentially check in to see if we were on the right track, not only with the commissioners and the city council members, but also with the community. Milestone 2, this should say 3, spring of this year was really focused on the preferred alternatives. So taking those initial draft alternatives, refining them based on public feedback, as well as feedback from the city council and planning commission, and trying to pin these down a bit more and trying to bring some more detail to what they would actually look like and where they might be located at a planning level. And finally, where we are today is the continuation of milestone number 3. So this is the spring and summer of this year, which is really the draft TSP and adoption phase. Again, we've been collecting information from the public about the draft TSP document itself. We had an online open house open from March 23rd to May 13th. We had our Joint Planning Commission and City Council workshop May 10th, not long ago. And here we are today on the 25th or on the 26th, bringing these topics to you today. Just touching on some of the key highlights from the most current survey. So this is a survey that we collected in the last couple of months, specifically regarding the draft TSP. And I just wanted to point out that although there are certainly a diversity of opinions within the community regarding the TSP, overall, what we've heard so far is support. So, 67% of respondents agree that overall the recommended projects are right for Cannon Beach. Another example is 82% of respondents support the pedestrian projects in the draft TSP, which again was identified as a priority for what the plan should accomplish. And 76% of the respondents also support the bicycle projects in the draft TSP. And again, these figures were shared with you at the Joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting, so I won't go through all of them, but they are there and I'm happy to come back to them if you'd like to see them. And at a slightly higher level, I also just want to touch once again on what we've heard overall, not just in this last phase, but throughout the entire course of the project. I think the biggest thing is the village. So we, again, recognize that this is not an urban locale. There isn't a huge desire among community members for urbanization or development, and we completely respect that. As part of that consideration, we've really once again tried to take the typical toolbox that you would bring to a community, which would consist of sidewalks and bike lanes, and really tried to think through how can we achieve similar benefits without those kinds of urban style facilities. And I think we've done a good job identifying solutions that are creative, cost-effective, safe, and don't further the urbanization of Cannon Beach in a meaningful way. I think the other big thing, and of course this is not a surprise, is parking. So parking is a major issue, especially in the downtown core. And it used to be more of a seasonal issue, but what we're seeing increasingly is that the tourist demand to Cannon Beach is year-round. So one of the key opportunities for the city of Cannon Beach, which the TSP offers, is a parking management strategy. Currently, there's not a lot of parking management happening at all. It's a little bit of a free-for-all. Parking stalls are undefined in many places, and there isn't a program for handling overflow or business access or even residential parking permits. So we've drafted a fairly comprehensive parking management strategy that the city can implement over time that can really help make a difference in the community today for locals. So next up, the meat of the transportation system plan, or excuse me, the organization of the transportation system plan is as follows. So chapter 1 is really the introduction and sort of impetus for what the transportation system plan is, what the regulatory and legal framework is for it, and what it aims to accomplish. Chapter 2 is the existing and future needs, which is really just an abbreviated version of the long form technical reports that we've developed that are available to the public. Chapter 3 is the goals and policies for the TSP. So these are the overriding sort of philosophical principles for what the TSP will try to accomplish, and then specific policies that are being proposed for adoption. Chapter 4, this is what I meant to say. Chapter 4 is the meat of the plan, which is the actual modal elements for the TSP. So this includes the projects, programs, and policies, or excuse me, the projects and programs for each of the elements of the transportation system. And lastly, Chapter 5 is the funding and implementation strategy. And again, this is a critical component of an effective TSP in that we try to lay out specific opportunities that the TSP would enable the city to pursue in terms of external grants and funding opportunities to cover the cost of some of these future improvements. I also wanted to touch really quickly on the actual goals themselves. There are some associated objectives that I hope everyone's had an opportunity to read over the last year. But just to touch on these quickly, goal number 1 is preserve Cannon Beach's seaside village charm. Goal 2 is balancing the needs of different transportation system users in downtown and midtown. Goal 3 is enhancing safety and emergency preparedness. And goal 4 is fostering a sustainable transportation system. And I share these not only as the philosophical principles for the TSP, but also because these were the goals that we used to essentially evaluate how good any given transportation system plan recommendation might be. So all of the projects and programs that have been proposed have been sort of run through this lens of how well do they meet these goals. Again, Chapter 4 of the Transportation System Plan is the heart of the plan. The TSP organizes the projects and programs by mode, and it includes a recommended prioritization of projects based on near-term opportunities, medium-term, and long-term over the next 20 years. And all of these transportation system planning recommendations and projects are really, were not pulled out of thin air. I mean, these were things that we identified early on when we were doing the initial research to understand what the needs were, going through that draft alternatives phase and trying to develop a long list of potential solutions, running cost estimates, planning level cost estimates to try to understand what the potential costs of these things would be. And then, of course, running that through rigorous public and stakeholder feedback to understand which of these projects were most likely to be effective and supported in the community. And again, I'll remind you all that 67% of the respondents, at least just on the online open house, have agreed that the recommended projects are right for the community. And for the sake of time, again, I really wanted to let the Planning Commission hash this out. So I'm not going to go through some of the slides that I went through last time that lay out some of the specific transportation improvements that are recommended. But I will just mention once again that the recommendations cover all of the modes within the city. So that includes the pedestrian and bicycle system, parking management strategies, roadway improvements to help manage some of the congestion and delays, especially on Hemlock Street, transit, emergency response and evacuation, emerging transportation options. This includes some of the things that maybe aren't in the city yet, but that I know the city has to address. For example, scooters. Jeff has let me know that that the city's been approached multiple times by vendors that would like to operate in town. And I just want to be very clear that the TSP is not recommending a scooter program or saying that scooters are right for the community. But what we are saying is that the TSP provides an opportunity for the city to have a proactive conversation about whether or not scooters are appropriate for Cannon Beach. And I've seen in other communities throughout the country that many communities that don't have these policies in place are essentially blindsided when they're hit up by an outside vendor that wants to operate. And again, having proactive policies in place can help the city figure out what they want the future to look like in terms of these emerging transportation options. That also includes Uber, Lyft, other forms of shared transportation, and getting a head start and getting those regulatory policies in place before the city is compelled to react. Okay, and I just wanted to touch on the total estimated costs. So these costs are based on planning level cost estimates. So I will reiterate that these are planning level. These do not account for future inflation, and they're really basically just based on a high level engineering analysis that looks at all of the specific materials and components that would go into any individual project, considers the average cost of these unit costs, and then aggregates them to try to get to essentially a reliable ballpark figure for what these things might cost. So the total estimated cost of all of the projects that we've recommended in the TSP, or that we've proposed, is $10.4 million. And again, this would be intended to be invested in over the course of 20 years. This isn't a one-time investment. The cost-constrained projects really refer to the projects that the city has the existing funding to pay for over time. And the aspirational projects are those that the city would need to go out and seek external funding for. And building upon that, we did run an analysis to understand what road fund revenues were available to the city based on the last 5 years of information. So over the last 5 years of road fund revenues, the city has had an average of $248,000 per year. Assuming that the city is able to continue generating that amount of money per year over the next 20 years, it's expected that Cannon Beach will generate approximately $5 million over the next 20 years. So one of the principal things that the funding strategy tries to understand is, what do you do with that $5 million? And again, what do you do with that $5 million, knowing more about what the specific needs and opportunities are within the community based on all of this work that we've been doing? So from that, the next step is understanding what the funding gap might be. So assuming $248,000 per year over the next 20 years, the city would have to raise approximately $274,000 per year to pay for the whole cost of the $10.4 million to implement TSP projects. So while that might sound like a lot of money, and it certainly is, one of the biggest benefits of the TSP is that it enables the city, once again, to actually pursue outside funds to pay for this. And that would actually include some of the portion that that was included in the cost constrained project. So there's a huge opportunity out there for the city to essentially address the local transportation systems with outside money. And here's just a quick sampling of some of the state grants that we have identified that the city could pursue. And once again, the ability for the city to go after this money is really tied to having a TSP in place. And once again, that's one of the reasons why the Oregon revised statutes, or excuse me, the administrative rules and the transportation planning rule require local jurisdictions to adopt these TSPs. It provides consistency throughout the state, and it also enables these communities to actually go out for competitive money to make improvements to help people get around safely and comfortably. Okay, and the last couple of slides, I just wanted to touch on some of these topics. Like Jeff mentioned, there's a more comprehensive memo that was shared with you today. I know that it came today, so I don't expect that everyone has had a chance to read it thoroughly, but I just wanted to touch on what I thought were some of the highlights in terms of what we heard. And specifically, I think there was some maybe some misunderstandings about what is in the plan. So I just wanted to clarify the scope of some of the recommended projects. So I've seen through several public comments that folks are concerned that we are proposing sidewalks. And I just wanted to be very clear that nowhere in the TSP are sidewalks recommended. When I mentioned several times throughout the last few minutes here that we really tried to tailor the recommendations to the local context, side paths are a prime example. Sidewalks are generally the best practice for providing safe spaces for people to walk. But again, we recognize that the level of impact that it would have on the community, the aesthetic sort of impact, and the cost were such that it just didn't seem like the right solution for Cannon Beach. So side paths were identified as another way of going about this. Not many communities that I know of in Oregon have really implemented these on a programmatic basis, but they are an available option. And this has, again, been vetted through our technical team, ODOT, and the community. Side paths, again, are not sidewalks. They are at grade, meaning they're not raised off of the street. And they essentially just make use of existing shoulder spaces. And the physical improvements would really be limited to compacting those shoulder materials using gravel or some other hard packed material, possibly using some striping to delineate the space better, and potentially including some signage to let people know that it's a safe place to walk. So again, these are I think very tailored solutions to Cannon Beach, and I think could really support the city's overall village feel and context. Stop controls. So another comment was regarding the roundabouts. So I just wanted to clarify once again that the main recommendation that we're making is implementing four-way stops along Hemlock Street. It's a relatively cost-effective improvement. I believe each one of those stop signs would be about I don't want to misquote myself, but the recommendation in the TSP is basically $7,000 per intersection. So relatively low cost and would have a substantial impact on managing some of the traffic operations in downtown, especially during peak visitor seasons. We've also recommended a future potential recommendation, which is mini roundabouts. And to clarify, these are not full-size traditional roundabouts that you would see in an urban context. FHWA has provided guidance that I've linked in the memo that provides some principles that can be used to design much smaller roundabouts that are appropriate within the existing right-of-way. So these are not anticipated to have significant impacts to surrounding land uses. They can be built within the existing right-of-way. They can be designed in such a way that really facilitates safe bicycle and pedestrian crossings. And they can also be accommodated to preserve an adequate level of freight and large vehicle pass-through. So once again, stop controls, four-way stops is really what we're recommending. But we also recognize that 20 years down the road, intersections might not be working as well as they are today. So the TSP identifies those mini roundabouts as a potential future thing or improvement for the city to consider. Parking management, another, I think, misconception about parking management is that we are recommending the construction of new parking, and that is not true. The parking management strategy, if you read it in detail, does not recommend the construction of new parking lots or new parking stalls. What we are recommending is better management of the existing on and off street parking supply. So for example, if a off-street parking lot was to be created, it would be created using existing land and existing parking space. It wouldn't be a new development in any way. The other thing that I wanted to clarify is regarding paving. So the only segment of paving that is recommended throughout within the entire TSP is a short segment of Pacific Street. I have the TSP open. I can pull up the exact extent, but it's essentially a 2-block length. And that is just to facilitate or to complete the paved section that's already existing along Pacific Street. Nowhere else in the plan is paving recommended. And generally, once again, even for pedestrian improvements, we're looking at ways to implement those kinds of treatments without resorting to concrete. And once again, I'll just reiterate that the TSP is not recommending a scooter program. Once again, this is more about creating and adopting proactive policies for the city to help manage and regulate scooters. And part of that regulation might be that the city decides to just not allow scooters, and that's totally on the table. But what we are recommending, once again, is that the city has a meaningful discussion about this and that it's reflected in the TSP to help support future discussions.
Eddie, what did you hear about trails that you skipped over?
Trails, honestly, it's escaping me what I was referring to there, but I know that there were some concerns about tree impacts and potential locations of the trail alignments. As a matter of fact, I do think this is what it was referring to. So this is kind of getting to the overall sort of scope and intent of the TSP. So these are planning level recommendations, meaning that they can certainly be modified and refined moving forward, and they will have to be refined. I mean, none of the recommendations in the plan are ready to go, so to speak. For starters, they don't have funding, and even once they have funding, there's a whole project development and design engineering process that needs to happen before you can really have a meaningful conversation about where these things will go. What we've done in the TSP is we've drawn what we think are strategic connections within the community that link, for example, evacuation areas to commercial areas, residential areas, but the exact alignment and the exact impacts are way out from where we are today. So just to clarify that we're not anywhere near understanding what the exact trail impacts would be. And I don't think that's a reason not to adopt the TSP. I think that once again, the TSP gives the community a starting point for saying, okay, these are the connections that have been identified. Is this really what we want? If we want to move forward with a trail, let's do some additional analysis and research to understand what the actual impacts would be. And then from there, let's refine it further until we get to somewhere that is supported in general by the community. This last slide really just gets to some of the points that I just shared. So again, these are planning level recommendations. The TSP, once again, is a 20-year long-range planning document, and all of these TSPs throughout the state of Oregon require future work, future iterations, research, design, project development before really understanding what they'll look like at the end of the day. And, you know, I think one of the things that Cannon Beach has going for it is that you have a very engaged community, which is great. You have people that turn out every single time, and you have a planning commission and a city council who listens, right? So I think as these developments or these project opportunities are identified and funding is obtained and they start to move forward, there's going to be a lot more discussion between the planning commission, city council, and the public in order to make sure that we get these things right. But once again, the key thing to adopting the TSP is having that framework and having those kind of fat lines on a map to advance these conversations in the future. So that's the end of my presentation. Like I said, I really wanted to make sure that we reserved as much time as possible for you all to discuss. So I'm here to answer questions. Ryan can answer questions as well. But Jeff, I suppose I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I was going to just say before we get to Mickey is that we also, like Eddie said, we have Ryan on the panel here. We also have Michael Duncan from ODOT also. So if there are other questions from any of the planning commission, feel free. Okay. And so I'll turn it over to Clay to let, questions. Funnel.
Okay. Did you say Mickey had a question?
I think
Yeah, I
Nick-
did.
Bunch, go ahead.
First, Eddie, I want to thank you so much for your patience and your hard work. I truly appreciate it. And the same to you, Jeff. I know you've both been working very hard, and I did attend at least one of the open houses online, and I was really, really impressed with the kind of feedback that the community was bringing. So overall, I feel like this has been a very successful process. My specific question at the moment, I have many different thoughts about the plan. My very specific one, though, is when you talk about funding, I agree, we really need to line ourselves up for funding. What is necessary? So we have to have an overall plan. Do we also, when we go for funding, have to say, here's the specific project that we are seeking funding for? So do we have to have created priorities within the plan, or is it just a blanket grant saying we have a plan and we're trying to fund, period?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that, but I think Ryan and Michael would also have some good insight. But I think generally, Mickey, the answer to that is that it really depends. So first of all, it depends on the grant opportunity.
Okay.
Some of the grant opportunities are very specific to a certain sort of category of project. So for example, you might have a project that, or excuse me, a funding opportunity that's related to safe routes to school, right? So the city would need to provide a compelling argument for a program of improvements that meaningfully improves safe routes to school. And what the TSP, again, enables the city to do is to point to an existing policy document that says, hey, we've identified this as a priority. It's in our plan. We've identified a connection to these safe routes to school opportunities. And many of, especially the Oregon specific grant opportunities will actually require these to be in some form of an adopted plan. So it's kind of a basic requirement for getting in. Yeah, and I think the other thing to mention about priority is just that the priorities that are in the actual TSP, so we have the near term, medium term, long term. I mean, even if we adopted those this year, that doesn't mean those are actually the priorities, because priorities change, right? Public sentiment changes, council priorities may change, the planning commission may get really excited about a particular component of the plan. So just because something is low priority in the plan doesn't mean it can't be elevated if the right funding opportunity and the right sort of political will and community support comes along. So it's pretty flexible, but it again, the main sort of functional benefit that it provides is that it provides that basic access to some of those funding opportunities throughout the state.
Go ahead, Lisa. You're muted.
You showed the percentage of people who responded in a positive way towards various ideas. But I remember from the last meeting, I still am unclear on, is that me echoing there?
That is,
I'm still, I don't know what that's from. I'm still unclear on how many respondents did you have? And are you talking about the surveys, or are you talking about, at open houses, or what exactly?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kerr. That's a great question. So I actually calculated the total number of responses for all of the open houses that we've had so far, just because it's easy to tabulate because we have those surveys saved on an online platform. So I added it all up, and we've received a total of 266 unique survey submissions. So ostensibly, that's 266 people. That doesn't count for all of the feedback that we've received via email, in meetings, one-on-ones with Jeff, et cetera. So it's just a sample of everything that we've heard, but specifically regarding the surveys, that is the total number.
And the surveys went to full-time residents and second homeowners alike, right?
The surveys were disseminated broadly throughout the community, so it was an open link on the internet. And Jeff, I don't live in Jeff's brain, unfortunately, but Jeff, maybe you can share more about all of the outreach that you did, but I know that it did go out on social media. I think you emailed some people specifically. It was on the city website. And then possibly there were some other ways that you got the word out, right, Jeff?
We have a few different email serve lists. One's approximately 700 on the community-wide one. We also sent it, like you said, Lisa, to short-term rental and property management companies, those other lists that we have, utility lists. We have water utility lists for emails and stuff. So we send those out through email blast with each one of those kind of announcements.
Okay, thanks.
Any other question for Eddie or his partners while we? Was there any additional correspondence that we haven't seen that came in late?
Everything that, and like I said, we can look at here at the website, cannonbeachtsp.com. So everything has been, as of, I think, 3 o'clock or so, put up there. So if you go to cannonbeachtsp.com, you go to public comment. These are the latest ones up to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question if you don't.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
And I'm not sure who to address this to, but safety is popping up in here a lot. I guess that tsunami out there is scaring people a little bit, and I don't blame them, but wouldn't that be covered under a different policy? And, I get that you're going for some codependencies, being able to take care of or take advantage of other sourcing options through the TSP to take care of safety issues. But have we even talked to our safety people about any of this?
Sure. He's on, Rick Hudson's been on our pack the entire time
Okay.
and given quite extensive comments on every draft. In fact, he was one of the ones that changed, his presentation last week was based a lot on the Dagami studies combined with this. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because leveraging those funds are essential. $1 that we spend can be $5 to $10 that we get back from the state or federal funding. And if you look at federal funding streams, so much of it is now federally tied to emergency management or those types of emergent events. And so communities are struggling to be prepared for these things. And this is a perfect opportunity to combine those kind of facilities.
I get that. And I think that option might be available, whether you could include safety in this transportation plan or not. And my concern is that we have a transportation system plan that's driven by safety considerations as opposed to, community access and those other things. And I think sometimes those goals get mixed, right? They're conflicting. And I'd prefer, I get the fact that we want to leverage other sources of funding, but I don't want to have our transportation system plan driven by safety considerations.
Well,
I have personal preferences.
Yeah,
I should say that.
I think there's, that exactly. I think there's safety is one of the leading concerns in any transportation system. So, you can look at it however you like personally, but I think that is one of the guiding principles. It's one of the guiding objectives and goals of the system plans.
But when I go through, the ODOT, their policies, safety is not called out. So I'm wondering why we need to call out safety here.
Well, I can let Michael, Ryan, or Eddie speak to that. I'm not an ODOT.
Well, I just got on to see, they're doing a revision of the state transportation system plan right now. And they're laying out their guidelines and all the other stuff that they want to address as part of the state transportation plan. And safety is not part of it. It's reducing congestion. It's addressing climate change. It's, preserving the environment. It's getting cars off the road. It's not making sure our evacuation routes are clearly marked and we've got trails through the forest that get everybody there.
Well, I can tell you, I sat on a commission from ODOT on those systems, preparing the bridges, preparing the emergency routes. So I know it's a main concern.
Oh, I know it is, Jeff, and I'm not arguing that point. I'm just arguing that does safety go in the transportation system plan or some other document that we have? And I do think we have a document that is supposed to establish plans for evacuation routes.
Yeah, so
Like I see Michael Duncan.
we'll let Michael answer that, but we do have a emergency plan for the county and for the city. But that's what Rick Hudson has worked with our ODOT team and this team to.
Okay, I'll let it go, but I'd like to hear from Michael if he has something to say.
Sure. Thanks for having me. There we go. There we are. Yeah, I can speak to that. So Michael Duncan, transportation planner for ODOT, project manager, and I sat on the PMT for this project. So safety is a tremendous priority for Oregon Department of Transportation. It's part of our mission to move people and goods safely and efficiently on our system. So it's a foundational element of everything we do. And with our transportation system guidelines that we have up online, and certainly one of the key guiding documents that we use to scope this project, there's a safety chapter in the TSP.
Well, we're talking road safety. We're not talking building trails through forests to get to evacuation points, right?
No, in fact, one of kind of, you might call it the sister project to this, that was funded in the same grant cycle, was the Tsunami Evacuation Facilities Improvement Plan for Clatsop County. So we funded that with ODOT planning money, and that will be incorporated as part of the county's transportation system plan.
That's
So
kind of
from a policy, programmatic, project-based standpoint, safety is every step of the way. And I, not to say that it trumps other metrics. I think Eddie did a pretty good job there outlining the goals of this plan, also the evaluation criteria, and it is one of the many metrics that system plans use to evaluate and help prioritize the projects and policies that are part of it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Lisa has her.
Lisa, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. When we were talking about, like, I'm going to use scooters as an example, and you said that it was good to maybe have a discussion about scooters or have something in there so that we're not blindsided, like if a scooter company came in the future and wanted to put scooters in. What if we made a recommendation as part of this TSP, never scooters? Can't we do that too? Can't that be part of the TSP, never scooters?
Yes, Commissioner Kerr, and I put that in the memo to you all. And again, I apologize. I know that y'all haven't had a chance to read it yet, but yeah, I think that's on the table. I think if there's consensus already that never scooters, I think that can be a viable recommendation before adopting the TSP. My only, I suppose, caution to that is, once again, tourism is likely to increase over time. Congestion and transportation issues within the city are likely to increase over time. And we have a variety of tools to try to address that. And I don't think we really know if in 15 years scooters are going to be a good idea or not, but they might be. They might be part of a range of, or a suite of solutions to help manage congestion in downtown and provide additional options for people. So I guess, and obviously I'm an outside party here, but from my perspective, I think it's useful to keep some things in your back pocket, so to speak, so that if there's an opportunity 10 or 15 years down the road, you're able to do that. But again, if there's consensus on the Planning Commission today that never scooters, I think that's a viable path forward as well.
Can I add a comment as well? Sorry, I was going to suggest, that I think it would behoove the city to have a real clear policy on not just scooters, right? Because scooters are one, as Eddie's talking about, are one variety of a whole bunch of different kinds of emerging mobility devices, which is the phrase we use in the biz. But these today's scooters are tomorrow's electric rollerblades, right? I mean, there's a whole suite of different tools coming out there. So I think the city, a blanket ban on or a statement on scooters might not accomplish exactly what you're looking for, Commissioner. I think it might behoove the city to have a policy statement or a commitment in the TSP to generating a more robust policy about when somebody comes knocking at the door of the city and says, hey, we'd like to introduce this new mobility device, whether it's a scooter or anything. How is the city going to be responsive to that? What are the kinds of conditions and things that the city would want to make sure are in place to even talk about approving it or not? Right. That would just be my suggestion.
Right.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And I would just say that Lisa, that the city's already moving forward on scooters. We're going to have a discussion on June 7th at City Council or June 14th about scooter management of scooters, because I think Bruce is getting as many calls as I am. And so we're going to, traditionally we would go with this first, and then that gives kind of the guidance forward. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and bring that before the City Council.
Right, but if it's not on the menu, if it's, a vegetarian menu and scooters are meat, then we could say we don't want scooters.
Menu
Well,
metaphor.
Lisa, what's the benefit to saying never scooters, especially in a document that's living that we could change and renege on 3, 5, 10 years from now to say now scooters are viable? Why would we just totally take them off the menu? Vegetarians change to meat eaters and vice versa all the time these days. So I don't see why we would just blanket take something out of the realm of what could be accomplished in the future, especially to the extent we're able to always change it.
Yeah, except that I think that there's a general feeling that if it's on the menu, then it's more likely to happen. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from people against scooters. So I'm just saying, I think you have to think about how comfortable it makes citizens feel with the plan if there's something in there, even a possibility that they can't stand. And I think that has to be taken into account.
Why don't we come back to this? But before we come back to it, our city manager has something he'd like to add. Bruce, go ahead.
Well, it was funny listening to that. I can be a politician and say you're both right. From Lisa's standpoint, the action that we're going to be taking is not necessarily to say, okay, this is our management plan. What's happening is Jeff is getting a lot of approaches. I am too, from scooter companies and others. And right now we know that we are not ready to handle it. We don't want to handle it. And so the first round will be no. And then later on, if that changes, then we can go ahead and we can modify. But right now we want to be in a position that if we are approached, we're not forced to let somebody into an open storefront because we haven't taken any action.
And Bruce, if we modify in the future, that would mean going back to the community, taking the pulse, seeing what people want, feeling how others feel before we would say yes to scooters or whatever the menu item is.
I believe that's correct. I think that would be the process we would take.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Eddie, will you and your team be available to us beyond this evening? We will go beyond this evening, I'm sure, on this conversation. Are you guys going to be with us in our next meetings on this, or what's our access to you through this process?
Yeah, Michael, let me know if it's okay to share, but I'm just going to go ahead. So this isn't inked yet, but Michael is, very supportive of this community. He lives in the area, and he's actually gone back to ODOT and requested some additional funding for us. So we basically have some additional resource to be able to support ongoing conversations. So the scope is still being defined. I think it'll likely be in the form of an additional couple of meetings and some additional resource to, write further memos to clarify elements of the TSP or document consensus among the Planning Commission. But yes, we'll be available.
Great. Eddie, thank you. Michael, thank you for your advocacy for our little town. I think we're going to move next to public comment. I think what I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break before we do that. We're at 1 hour. I'm going to stretch my legs, and then we can go to our public testimony stage.
Thank you.
Let's come back at by this clock 7:05. Is that what you read on the?
Yeah, so 7:07 to the
7:07.
digital.
Call the meeting back to order. Oh, where is it?
Oh, she's got.
Good.
Okay, there we go.
Before jumping into the public testimony, question for my fellow commissioners. What if we have public testimony directed to us rather than getting into any kind of conversation with Eddie and his team?
I think that's fair.
That'll help move things along.
Sure.
Does that sound good to you all?
Yeah.
Aaron, Anna, Lisa, did you hear the idea?
No, I didn't.
No,
The idea was that we have public testimony with questions directed to us, not to Eddie and his team. We can be taking notes. Eddie can pay attention. He did that last time well. That way we can move along efficiently.
Yep.
that
Okay.
sounds good. Yeah.
That's good.
Clay-
Good by me too.
We had, Jan's here, so, but we also had Randy Nild who had requested to speak tonight, so if we,
I have to, Jeff.
yeah, I'm saying earlier on, online at that.
Okay. But you'll help me remember.
Randy Nild.
Okay. Okay, we'll move to our public testimony. Pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets of the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan, municipal code, or TSP, transportation system plan, which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the transportation system plan. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name, mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Are there any presentations by proponents of the transportation system plan? Okay, going once, twice. Okay, are there any presentations by opponents of the TSP, the transportation system plan? Please.
Okay. I guess first of all, my name is Lolly Champion. I live on 420 Oak Creek Road in number 602. And I would like to say that I'm not just speaking for myself, but because I send out an email that covers a lot of people, I also have incorporated in my few questions some of those comments. So that's okay. The first part, having reviewed this so many times on pages, and I can direct this to the presenter, pages 32 through 36, there's a number of items in there that goes ahead. It says, in this instance, the city may implement 3- and 4-way stops. That's just one of the examples. But my question is, and from others also, those 5 pages seem to give the city complete latitude to make those decisions. So I wanted to ask, how is that being handled where it says something like that? Particularly, I should address this to Jeff. And it's those pages that say the city may do that. It doesn't refer anywhere within those 5 pages that it refers back to the Planning Commission or to the City Council. So I want a clarification on that going forward with this TSP plan. That was my first question. I don't know if you want to answer these now or you would like me to read all my, I have several questions.
Yeah, Clay,
Well, I think I can tell you that's a question for us too up here. And there is some language out there that we're going to consider that's going to talk about the process for each of these different segments.
I was just concerned about the wording on those 5 pages because it seemed to give a great deal of latitude to the city.
Are you saying the verb is different, right? The verbs we use are different for that part of the plan as opposed to other parts.
Yes.
And it might be worthwhile for us to make those verbs consistent to eliminate ambiguity somewhere down the road.
Many of those on those 5 pages start out with the city may implement, and then it just goes on to say what they can do, but there's no safeguard that it would come back to you or the council. And that's why we just like a clarification on that. The second question is, talked about a north-south trail, and I realized that from hearing tonight that it's still not quite confirmed. Particularly the worry that comes out is if you look at one of the pages with the blue line on the trail that goes on to Sunset onto the Cannon Beach property adjacent to the ODOT right of way, and then goes up and ends up with Yukon at the end of the estuary. That was a great concern to many people about the trees that would have to be remain out of there to make that trail, and also how it would be maintained. And I always worry too about a trail that goes through the forest. It would be open to tourists and other people about the safety during climate change, with that being a worry about fire. And also who will maintain that trail, because I can tell you, I walk a lot of the trails with many other people picking up cigarette butts, etc. So that particular plan for that trail, I think really needs a lot of scrutiny. So that's my second question. And also on that second question, I know that you're doing tomorrow another school day example with people coming there. I would hope at some point when the trails are ready to actually be developed, that there would be a trail day for the residents in the neighborhoods they're going through and the city to actually see where those trails are and question the city staff, the city planning commission, and the city council about those trails, because many of the people that live in neighborhoods where these trails are going to go feel like suddenly that we know we give up our downtown and our midsection, but really, do we want tourists into our residential streets on a regular basis? And who will maintain those trails in those parts, and who will the trash receptacles be, etc.? That's my second question. Question 3, we've already done something that's been the TSP plan, which I think is great. That's the four-way stop, but we've already done it at Warren and Hemlock. And the cost quoted for all of those was $7,000. I'd like to know what the actual cost was to see how close our estimates are. And know going forward that they might be more expensive due to inflation, etc. But I'm wondering how much did that project actually cost? Because that would give us a good estimate on how well we planned, since many of these figures were done in 21. And we all know from going to the store, things have slightly changed. So you have something that's solidly already completed, and I think it would be of interest to know what that actual cost was. I think I might have had this already answered, whether the green dots, the dashes, and the square markings on all the trail maps mean. And I'm glad to know that they're not going to be cement or asphalt involved. But at some point, I would love to hear what the actual gradient going to be for those roads and those shoulders. Number 5 is, again, that goes back to the Yukon Trail, because that trail comes out at Yukon and then goes over to the Civic, correct, Jeff?
Well, that's one, the path shown
Right.
would go through analysis.
Right, because that cross right there from across Yukon, across Hemlock, that's just where you're coming out of the S-curves. I was going to say that really needs a lot more consideration. That was a concern for people in that neighborhood too, when they gave me feedback that crossing at Yukon to get to the Civic to the next trail that's in the TSP plan is questionable. In yellow line in the TSP plan is urban growth. And there's some mention of it throughout the plan, but I'm wondering at some point will we pin down the urban growth yellow lines in the TSP plan? What are you actually planning for that? I feel kind of like that's in there and it mentions the urban growth boundary, but then there's nothing else said, and I don't know whether that's an open question or something that is not a part of the TSP plan, and therefore why is it in there? So I guess there's clarification needed for white yellow lines in there. To know more about that. And I'm hoping, this is question 7, that the debt load that we could possibly obtain from this plan added to all the other projects we're doing right now may cost our bond rating and our debt ceilings for what we do in the city. So I would hope to see that we would have an answer on how we're going to control the near, the medium, and the far in relationship to the many other projects, especially the water and sewer and the plans that we have to maintain our water system through safety. and for the growth that we have. So those are my 7 questions, and I hope that I can get some type of answer. I'd love to share it with the people that I do share emails with. So thank you for your time.
Are your 7 questions also summarized in the email you sent?
I sent a long list of questions. I wrote them all out
Okay.
tonight, so
I was trying to keep up, and Mark, once you brought up here tonight, I did read your letter. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted your stuff.
These 2, if that would be helpful. I can send
That would be
them.
great. Appreciate your thoughtful
Thank you.
review of this. Are there any other opponents? Yeah, please go ahead.
Ann Stewart Gorman, PO Box 778, Cannon Beach, Oregon, 97110. And before I read this letter from my husband, Wes Warman, and myself, I wanted to just take issue with the percentage of support for this TSP that was presented by Eddie at the last TSP meeting and tonight. And it's my understanding, and I think it might have been Jeff that gave us this number, that only 33 of 1,500 Cannon Beach residents filled out the final survey. And that, in my humble opinion, can in no way seriously be construed to mean that 67% support this TSP. I mean, 33 people out of 1,500 filling out the last survey, which was where all these things were, after all this process, were presented to the public. I just think that's very questionable percentage of support. So this is the letter from my husband and myself. Dear Cannon Beach Planning Commissioners, first, we ask you all once again to find a place in this TSP discussion for the consideration of a cap on the number of visitors to Cannon Beach in the peak visitor season. This cap would influence all of the TSP items, from parking to paths and so on. Please do not ignore this request. The entire scope of the TSP is focused on increased visitors over the next 20 years. If we do not have an ever-increasing number of visitors, the entire perspective on the TSP items shifts. You are our planning commission, and we believe it is your responsibility to at least discuss this idea of a cap on seasonal visitors. Second, we've heard the suggestion of looking at the TSP items as a menu. Ideally, that might be acceptable, but practically speaking, how have we in Cannon Beach experienced other master plans? For example, take the Cannon Beach Water Master Plan. In the meetings prior to the adoption of the plan, Cannon Beach residents and members of the Public Works Committee voiced concerns with some of the items of the plan. These people were told the same thing we are being told now about the TSP. Don't worry. These projects will only come to fruition if they are really chosen by the community. The public process will be extensive. The projects will be fully vetted by professionals. What we've actually experienced has been members of the city staff championing these water master plan projects as if they are on a to-do list for them, rather than a menu where Cannon Beach residents, city, community, volunteers, and city councilors initiate the projects and then ask for city staff for assistance in implementing them. A master plan to-do list is very different than a menu. Well-meaning city councilors and other committee volunteers often seem overwhelmed and unable to actually see that rather than city staff assisting the community as they are hired to do, the city staff more and more appear to be taking control of the direction of our community as a whole. This process is backward. We do not have to look at progress like other coastal tourist towns. Real progress, in our view, looks at sustainability and livability, green infrastructure, trees, peace and quiet, and the idea that small is beautiful. Roundabouts, vertical evacuation structures that can be turned into parking garages, more paving projects for our roads, our gravel roads, etc. These ideas do not belong anywhere at any time in any Cannon Beach TSP. Please take them out. Go carefully through the entire list of items before adopting any of this TSP. Once again, we ask you all to take a breath, slow down. Remember our responsibility to those who came here before us and to those who will come after us. We are Cannon Beach. We are unique in all the region, in all the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight who'd like to speak? Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yeah, I'll let Randy.
Am I on?
There you go, Randy.
Some interesting conversations there.
Could you, Randy, could you state your name and address for the record, please? Thank you.
Randy Neal, PO Box 1092.
Thank you.
Some interesting conversations we've had already here tonight. You know, when you ask for people who are proponents versus opposing, I don't know how to answer that. I am a proponent for lots of pieces of, you know, concepts within a TSP. I'm an opposition to many items in the TSP. I fully support everything that Lali just said, because I sort of see the same kinds of things happening. We're moving very fast. I feel excellent about the work that Jeff and Eddie and his team has put in. I mean, they've collected a vast amount of information about pedestrian traffic, traffic flows, parking information. Unfortunately, I don't see how all of that got translated into this particular document. This document's supposed to be a strategic plan. I used to work for Intel, and I've done many strategic plans. And one of the key items, key tests, is does this give everybody a vision of what it is or what it isn't? And earlier today, all of a sudden I see Eddie making a list of 5 or 6 things saying, well, it's not paving and it's not sidewalks. one of the problems with the TSP as it exists today is it is not telling the citizens what it really is. And then likewise, you need to be doing the opposite, telling people what it is not. The strategic plan right now is a menu of many items. And we heard from Lisa, that, once it's on a menu, it's likely to be done. And, and in my mind, there's a lot of things on this menu list. They're almost conflicting. I mean, on the menu was building more parking. On the menu was a plaza. On the menu was many configurations of hemlock, couplets. But the TSP isn't giving us any prioritizations of those various things and isn't telling us what it is and what it is not. So I would ask that you go back and really go through that and understand, so you can communicate to the community and rally the support of, these are the things we want to be 20 years from now, as opposed to here's a list of menu items that we could pursue, and somebody will pursue, or hopefully somebody will pursue. I remember I've been pretty involved. I've attended either meetings or I've watched all the Zooms. I've read all the public comment. I've reviewed lots of the statistics of things. I've provided many inputs. I remember sitting here in June last year, and there was, 2 various open houses with the advisory committee and citizens. And, I have a list of here of like 30 things that were brought up. Unfortunately, through this process in the last year, there's some things in there that have never been pulled forward. There's nothing in here on, what would we like to do? What would we suggest to the state to do with Tolovana or Ecola? We're doing a transportation plan. I understand that we don't own those, but we should have an opinion on how the state goes and puts those out. And this transportation plan doesn't talk about either of those things. If we believe a 3-hour parking limit is good for downtown, why isn't a 3-hour limit recommended to the state for Tolovana? There's nothing in the TSP document that really says this is our plan for neighborhood right-of-way parking. In fact, it might be that, we're going to solve our downtown parking by, using up these unused spaces in the neighborhoods around downtown. So there were several, I don't have my list, RV parking, RV access. Was a big concern with citizens. There's nothing in here. The safety going up and people parking at the top of Haystack Hill and people walking down both sides of the street is another one that's not addressed here. Another one would be 20 years from now, maybe the city is going to use Southwind, and what's the transportation element that's related to Southwind? So there's things that came forward that never seemed to make it into the TSP. And then in addition, there's things in the TSP that never really got any traction or definition. So the loading and freight around downtown had lots of input from customer, business owners and community. But basically this says, the TSP says, we'll go look at it. So there's no way a business member has an understanding of what's the vision for this TSP related to freight and loading. Likewise on intracity bus and or trolley uses. One of the things that was talked about early on was, Hemlock is the main access route for emergency vehicles. And we need to figure out, an alternative route, which in my mind is Spruce. But, the plan basically says, let's put lots of people and bicycles on Spruce. So that, the emergency vehicle backup route doesn't seem like it's included. And there was lots of stuff talk about rapid tourist evacuation. There were pictures of towers and whatever, But in reality, nothing ever really got defined in that aspect as well. Like Lolly, I filled out the TSP surveys, but the surveys were really tilted towards being able to say there was a satisfaction. Just like tonight, who's opposed, who's a proponent. It's like, well, I'm a proponent for pieces, but I'm an opponent for other pieces, and I don't know how to answer this survey question. So I, really would ask that more community stakeholder inputs get collected. It would have been nice to have a dozen trail people really provide inputs and create a vision for what do we want over the next 20 years, or get 12 bicyclists together and have a really good solid conversation of what do we would like the bicycle pathways or routes to be around town. The public transit, 12 public transit users, or some business, downtown business members who need to understand the impacts of this TSP on employee parking, on customer parking, on freight and delivery, on traffic flows. And then if a couplet or a plaza, or, would any of those work? What are their thoughts? I don't think that kind of discussion has been had. So like I said, I've provided lots of inputs. I don't have any real hot buttons that I'm a proponent or an opponent for. But probably the only thing that I really have passion about is the bicycling options. But I think this TSP needs a lot more work in terms of being able to get the consensus from the community of this is what it is and this is what it is not. And like Lolly said, I think a large, element of it is how do we do demand management of limiting the people who show up at the front door? And how do we, get them through our little community in the best way that they feel good about it, coming and visiting, but we're not overwhelmed. I know that Multnomah Falls implemented a plan like 2 years ago. I've never heard anybody in this TSP talk about that program and whether it's been successful and how it might apply. But I hear them, I hear the team saying we need to figure out a plan for demand management. But right now, nobody could explain that vision to the rest of the community in any logical way. And I also know that the historic Columbia Highway is also implementing a program this summer. And, so they're tied to, you can only enter this area in this time frame. We don't guarantee parking once you get here. And then likewise, we're pairing it with bus service to get people from Portland to this limited access kind of place. So, I asked the Planning Commission to really go back and look. I've provided some sample questions, but we really need to have a solid vision of what this TSP is and what it is not.
Randy, would you mind if I asked you a question?
Sure.
You seem to have spent a lot of time looking this over, and your comments are thoughtful. I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things that we are really struggling to balance is the idea of, and it's in our comprehensive plan, maintaining a village character. It's something we're talking about. I won't say ad nauseum because it's important, but we're talking about a lot, and there's a lot of disagreement about it. But one of the things I think about when trying to measure, for example, when trying to measure parking, when trying to figure out how many people are in a space, is I suddenly see these electronic signs that say there's so many spaces in this lot and that lot, and you shouldn't come here now because of that. And we get into this very technological conversation, whether that's something on a road sign or a phone. In your letter, you had said, so that's one way of handling it. It had also been mentioned, and I think I was one of the people who said, we could also manage parking by doing nothing. And it would manage itself. People would become frustrated coming here and they couldn't park, and they would move on. you said we should avoid that type of thinking. Do you have any thoughts on, how do you manage something like parking, which either you let supply and demand take care of itself, or you regulate it pretty heavily and continue to keep this village feel that we're talking about? I mean, we can really micromanage parking. We could add more lots. We could put counters on them, but suddenly you add buses. But then we come up against challenging our idea of what a village is. We've heard a number of people say they don't want that sort of transportation system here. They don't want that additional parking. We're just going to encourage more people. Do you have, I know I'm not hitting you cold with this, but you've thought about it a lot. I'd be curious your thoughts on.
Like I said before, I'm really only passionate about the bicycling stuff, but I have provided inputs about couplets and plazas and parking and whatever. And I heard the other night, it was probably you, and I remember seeing Lisa, talk about the, traffic is going to be, congestion is self-limiting. Well, it is, but the people who are going to be most frustrated are us. I mean, it's going to impact us first and most and always, long before it ever gets out that says, oh, don't go to Cannon Beach, pass it, whatever. So that's why I said in my letter, don't have that mentality that one of the solutions is just letting congestion happen and then people will avoid us. Because in the meantime, we are going to be the most frustrated people because of all the congestion, because it hits us every day, each and every day. And then the other one is it's going to last for a long time. I mean, to me, if I was this part of the city, I'd be looking at demand management types of things right away that says, how can I won't say discourage people from coming here, but it's more of, I want to figure out ways to limit. I mean, Multnomah Falls is doing it because they have limited parking. The Columbia Highway the historic highway, same kind of thing. Vista House has limited parking. It's a limited scope. So they're trying to figure out ways to do demand management. And part of that is, if I give you these restrictions, I'm also going to give you some public transit. So there's things that go hand in hand of, yeah, I might not let you bring your car, but I'll make sure there's 2 or 3 buses going to Cannon Beach, and at least we'll deal with the pedestrians. I'm not a big proponent of the 4-way stops, because I think our bigger issues are all of the pedestrians going across. I was just looking at data today that says in a 15-minute period, there were 400 people that crossed from Hemlock at 2nd Street in various directions. I also looked today and saw that there were 1,600 cars in a day, basically 100 an hour, that went down 2nd Street between Hemlock and Spruce. And there are 10 parking spaces on that little stub. It's like, and the other one is of the 1,600 cars that went down that little 200 yards, 50 of them had ended up tried to take a left-hand turn. Right. So like the data that Eddie and Ryan and all of you guys have are like fantastic. It tells us what we need to know and what we need to do and how to convince the community. But I don't see how it's getting incorporated into this TSP.
Randy, I really appreciate your thoughtful comments. You have really got me thinking about some of these things. And again, I wouldn't have asked the question of you originally if I didn't think you'd have a thoughtful point of view. So thank you.
Okay.
Are there other, one of your thoughtful comments, are there other people who would like to speak at this time? I won't call them opponents or proponents. I'm going to say other people who'd like to speak on the TSP at this time. Jeff, I'm not the best.
I don't
have any hands.
No one raising their hand right now.
You're speaking now. You're muted. We can't hear you. We'll give it a final count here.
Just raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
Or wave it at us. Okay. If there is no other, if there are no other requests to speak, we'll close the public testimony. Last chance, okay, then let's go to, is there a staff response, or Eddie, would you like to comment?
I'd like to
Anything you heard? Questions?
Possibly. I need to collect my thoughts. There was kind of a lot there.
Well, maybe what we can do is just kind of a joint response with the planning commission as you, and you can chime in some of these questions that I heard. I think we echo here, many of them. And you can chime in as we kind of go through a little list of them. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay.
I can go through at least a few of those from
Sure.
that I've made notes on. So just starting with the first ones from Lolly, about the north-south trail and trees and maintenance. Yes, it would take a project level review, survey and review of what would need to be taken out, or if none could be taken out. You know, that is not something of analysis, and so maintenance as well. Any of these projects or programs that is put forward would have to be vetted by the city council and the budget committee, fits into a capital improvement plan. And, you know, how do we maintain anything that we do in this community? And so that's part of the budgeting process.
Jeff, can I interrupt for just a second? And you guys, my fellow commissioners, see if you agree with me. One, I picked up a couple of themes as I was listening. That is more citizen involvement, more feeling of a sense of control of the process, a sense of each of these projects has some sort of a process to it. So it's not just a blanket approval. Mike, I really like the language, and we could talk about your language.
Do it now because I don't know. Randy, I've done a few of those strategic plans too. Is he gone?
Randy's still there, yeah.
I would like to know.
Why don't you read that?
I would like to know whether Randy and the other people who are objecting would be less inclined to object today if they had language in there that protected their interests going forward. And, you know, I think this came up during the joint planning session, and I took the liberty of trying to write something that would go in the plan itself that would state exactly what everybody's saying. And, you know, and that is, don't worry about it, because we can't do any of these projects until we go through a full process. So this is what I recommend.
Mike, may I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
Jeff, do Lisa, Anna, and Aaron have copies of what Mike has here?
Hey, let me share my screen. I have it right.
Okay, why don't you share the screen, and then I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
You know, and I have to say, I was on the same page as Randy and other people in this room until I started listening to what Jeff was actually telling me about and other experts, what this plan is intended to do. And I just reflected what they were telling me in this language. Adoption of this transportation plan does not constitute authorization or approval to proceed with specific transportation system options outlined herein, nor does it prevent the community from consideration of other or additional transportation system options as necessary to meet the goals and policies set forth herein as the needs of the community or available technology change. Any and all transportation system project or projects to be undertaken pursuant to this transportation system plan, whether outlined herein or not, must go through full administrative review and approval, including public hearing before the Design Review Board, the Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Public Works Commission. I just learned today they're a committee, I'm sorry. And any other quasi judicial or legislative body duly organized under the municipal code as applicable, including opportunity for public comment in accordance with applicable state, county, and local law. That's the first paragraph. Second, in implementing this transportation system plan, the city shall be guided by the following goals and values: preserving the community's coastal village charm, preserving the community's unique natural and historical heritage, reducing carbon emissions, balancing the needs of residents and visitors to the community, creating a transportation system that is equitable and responsible to the needs of all users, reducing congestion on the community streets, enhancing safety, fostering a fiscally sustainable transportation system. third paragraph and final. In the event of conflict between this transportation system plan and the comprehensive plan or the municipal code, terms and policies of the comprehensive plan or municipal code as applicable shall prevail. I think the intent of this was to say, this truly is a menu. We're not buying anything tonight. We won't be buying anything whether we approve this or not. We'll buy it after we go through the full process, including the painful meetings we have in this before this commission. So, you know, if I were asked to approve this document tonight and say everything on there goes, I'd say there's no way in hell I'd agree. But with this language, I think we preserve the right as residents of this city to object at the appropriate time when the plans are clear and we have something to object to.
When I first read this, I liked it because I've read through this transportation plan and just been overwhelmed at trying to figure out what is the best way to handle this. Should this not be on here? Should it not be on here? I couldn't even begin to tackle that. And so the idea that we run each of these components through a process that everybody's involved in, not just city staff or a commission, that the public has the opportunity to comment on, that it's run through the normal channels that we run any new section in our comprehensive plan or the code, makes me feel a lot better about these actually being something that people have had a chance to understand, they've had a chance to be notified about, a chance to understand what's being done, voice their concern, and feel like they've been given a process, not all of a sudden there's a tractor in front of their house putting a new path out.
I'll add too that I get the benefit of this plan and that it makes available funding that we wouldn't ordinarily have available without a plan if and when we decide to go ahead with something like this. The very concept of having a transportation plan all of a sudden opens up a lot of grants for us that we might decide to use at a later date when a project is approved.
Eddie, Michael, you guys have been through a lot of these plans. This is basically a way of us saying, hey, it's a great idea. Menu's been used a number of times that we might do. Is this going? Oh, Bill, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thanks. Not so much a question. I don't want to interrupt where you're going with to ask Eddie and Ryan, but this is the first time I saw that language from Commissioner Bates. And the general concept I think is good. I just want to be, to the extent the Planning Commission heads that way, to have some time to work it, to make sure everybody understands what it means. And in particular, what I'm concerned about is the full administrative review and how that plays out in different projects. Without the TSP, the city currently has full jurisdiction and control over its rights of ways and can do a variety of different things. Some require some type of review, some don't. This city tends to be very community involved. And, whether it's through Public Works Committee, the Planning Commission, and so my point is, if the Planning Commission is interested in that, we should make sure that we spell out what full administrative reviews means for different types of projects. For example, there are certain types of projects that might be pretty straightforward and really don't need to go through a lot. There are others that really should. And I just want to make sure that's spelled out so there aren't any misapprehensions about what will and won't be considered in that process.
Hey, Bill, my intention was to preserve that flexibility for the city. And if you want to wordsmith it to fix it in a way that you think does that, I just don't want to have three-story tower built down on the bank of Ecola Creek, right? Without people talking about it.
I absolutely agree. And I understand that desire. I just want to make sure that there's not an expectation that comes out of this that isn't fulfilled. And, it's the Planning Commission recommendation to the City Council who then decides how that process, works.
And I get that, and that's the right thing, but my feeling is most people don't object to the little things that the city's going to do, and they object to the big things. So if you want to fix that, fix it.
Yeah, I think we need to be a little careful on what's little and what's big. We get
Well,
it.
I know. Yeah, the point was, if somebody wants to put a four-way stop, if the city wants to put in a four-way stop, I'm not likely to inclined to object. $7,000, nobody's gonna object. I don't think we even have to ask, do we? Do we have to
I think
ask?
you have
to put a four-way-
different opinions even on this planning commission.
Yeah, Randy made a comment tonight that had me scratching my head. I mean, if we have a four-way stop and pedestrians are crossing there, are we creating a bigger mess? I don't know.
We might be.
Might be.
We might be, but hey, go ahead.
Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that one of the ways to avoid that, just going over every little thing in the transportation plan, is to remove the options that we don't like. And I think Jan put it really well when she said that it feels like a master plan, a to-do list that's different than a menu. And that's how it feels now. And I think what Mike wrote will really help with that. I think that something along those lines, not those exact words, but something along those lines would be very helpful and would make a lot of people feel more comfortable with the whole thing. But we can't set ourselves up for a battle over every single thing. And that's what we've done right here. If we leave everything, if we leave all the options, all the items on the menu in the transportation plan, then we are setting ourselves up. It's just going to be, everything will be a battle. So I think the things that are really objectionable should be taken out right off the top. And also, I will say that if funding comes up for something, let's say funding came up for I'm sorry to use this example again, but I'm going to use it. There was like $500,000 available for a cool scooter plan. Well, once that money is there and available, it becomes much more attractive to a city to go after that money because it's there. And if the scooter is on this menu, that would make it more likely that it would become an issue. So I think in order to not have these terrible battles or these big battles all the time, we should remove the things that people don't like for certain. And I'm not sure how you'd word it, and then add in language similar to what Mike suggested. And then I think you have something that is more palatable to the wider community. I mean, I know that you said something like 200 and something responses. That's like a fifth of the population, less than a fifth of the population. And then 76% of that less than a fifth of the population is not a very robust recommendation. So I do agree we have to be really careful. I think we should listen to people and see what things they really object to and why, and either figure out a way to fix it so it's not as objectionable or take it off the menu. And then we don't have such a huge battle to fight over every little option.
Chris, did you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Want to talk about, and I think the four-way stop, there might be something in the report that said that was what the cost would be. But for example, the four-way stop that we have now down at Warren Way, that was discussed for years. Staff got a grant and it was in the budget and we had to put up additional money. It was in the budget. And, had several meetings where that was all discussed and it was decided to move forward by the people that were elected by the people that are here. So in any project, I hear this thing that, staff is running everything. When I step back and I say, okay, then what water projects are we doing that we're forcing on people? Well, we're getting rid of asbestos concrete pipe that is brittle and won't survive a seismic event. We're going to put an HDPE pipe to go ahead and all the way down from the springs down, back up to the tank, and then back down, replacing the tank that was built before there were seismic requirements at all. And so that means when we're done with that, we will have the ability to get water from the springs down. And an important thing to me is that we can get it done. We're working so that we're able to go ahead and provide water someplace around the RV park within 3 days, because that's how long people can survive without water. And when we have everybody coming here for the day, there's not enough water bottles in this city to be able to go ahead and handle something like that. When we look at that, so anyway, so those are your water projects that we're allegedly forcing on people. Then you look at the wastewater projects, we're replacing generators that in the middle of the night, we've got people going ahead and taking them in trucks and they're moving from one place to another to be able to make sure we don't have sewage on the beach. And, several projects like that. So those are the things that we're doing. Those are part of the plan, the master plan. But, we're not, staff isn't just going and saying, well, let's go ahead and do that one. I think that the projects that we're doing are well thought out and they're all vetted during the budget process and at other times also. And one of the things that personally frustrates me, and I think the only exception I can say in the entire city is Jan, is that we had 2 budget hearings. We passed a budget of about $32 million. There was nobody, one person, a former budget member, was on Zoom or in the room other than Jan. And so I'm sorry, were you there, Lolly?
No.
Okay, but so when we're talking about process, it's hard to get people to participate in the process. But the process, it takes a long time to get something done. We had to get the loans approved for everything that we did. So there's all kinds of time for discussions.
So the point that people are trying to make, Bill, stuff that should become, and I was trying to capture here, and I'm happy to have Bill help me with it or take it over himself, is stuff that has to be brought before the planning committee will be brought before the planning committee. Stuff that has to go before the design review board will be brought before the design review board. There's nothing on here that we are giving approval to for you guys to proceed.
Absolutely.
And that's simply what this says. And it could be improved a lot, I'm certain.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, for people to get a sense that, I don't want to talk about distrust, but there happens to be some, and we need to give people a sense that they have a little bit of control.
Well,
and it's built into law, and I just want to represent what I've been told here.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand, but there is, and I don't understand the lack of trust because I explained all the projects and the process.
It's not mine.
No, I understand that, but it's frustrating for me because we try to go ahead and do this as openly as we possibly can and have trouble getting people to show up.
There is a problem in the city, and that is that we expect to be spoon fed, and that's got to stop. We all need to pay attention to what's going on in our community.
You mentioned that the water and the sewage. I think about those items as like critical infrastructure items.
Right.
That, you guys are the professionals or not. We need you to lead on that.
Right.
Are there items in this TSP that you look at and go, this is critical infrastructure? We have to have this. I don't know this, but, I could see where the tsunami evacuation is something that you guys just are saying, we have got to get this better. I don't know. Is there another section that you look at in this TSP and go, this is something we have to get? And we have to have some license to do it, to do our jobs.
Yeah. And I think, but even if we're doing something that's related to, hurricane or not hurricane, other job, to evacuations and all that, it still has to come before the council. We got council approval, or at least we informed the council at a public meeting that staff was applying for a grant to study the ability to strengthen or replace the First Street Bridge. That was just permission to apply for the grant. If we get the grant, we'll have to accept the grant in front of the council, or the council will have to do that, all those kind of things. So yes, there are things that we think are important, but they still all go to council. They're all in front of the council.
And sometimes the planning commission and the design review board.
Sometimes.
And it will continue that way.
Yes. But I don't know if anybody could point to anything. I've heard, tonight that staff is just doing these projects without any approvals. I wish somebody could name one, because I know how much time it takes to go through all these approvals. And I believe in the process to go through the approvals. But staff is not spending money that have not been authorized by council.
Is funding for the bridge partially going to be found when we have a transportation plan in place?
It would help. It will help if we have the transportation grant. I think it was Jeff was saying something.
And Karen wants to speak as well, and I think she'd be happy to speak on this subject as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it could, but right now, again, there's nothing, what's only thing that's happening is we've got permission, we have permission to apply for the grant. We got it's crazy, the process you have to go through. The people that give you the grant said, okay, you can move forward with this grant. And so we are moving forward with the grant now. It's like you have to get permission to do it and then you go into the next phase. All that stuff was run in front of the council.
So, well, let's just take that as an example. You get approval, you submit your proposal, you get the funding. You go to a design review, you go to an engineering firm, you say, draw me up a plan, right? Show me how you can strengthen this damn bridge. If they just strengthen it, probably not a citizen in the community will give a damn. If they say, I want to widen it by a lane, then people will raise holy hell. And you won't be able to do anything anyway, because you'll have to come see us.
Exactly.
So there, yeah. So
there'll be a report.
Yeah.
It'll say, this is the cost to do 2 lanes. And then this is how many people you can get across within a certain amount of time. 3 lanes would give you this additional amount of time, additional height might be, it would all come before the council. Then we would have to either get permission to apply for grants to go ahead and pay for it. And we would have to take that money, put it in the budget as a revenue, and then put in a project as a project.
See, you're missing a step in there. The thing that is nice about the planning commission is people get to comment before it gets to go to the council. We get to influence things. If all you're saying is everything we're going to do here goes to the council, then I'm not going to approve it. I want community input.
The community input happens in front of the people that the people elected.
That's when you wrapped up your little project, put a bow on it, said, here, approve it or not.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That may not be the practical, and I'm not saying I feel this way, but I can tell you I've heard that it is wrapped up in a bow and handed to council and it's done before it comes. Not, again, Bruce, you guys do a great job. I'm behind you, but I'm telling you, I've heard.
We need to,
And I know those kind of comments are out there, but we can't show up with the project wrapped up in a bow if it isn't in the budget. So we had to go to the council. Nobody shows up for the budget meeting, but we had the opportunities for all that stuff to happen. And then it's going to be at a workshop where we're going to talk about it. They can't approve it at a workshop. We have to take it to another public meeting. And then that's when it would get approved. And the public comment, would be made at both of those opportunities, possibly again, prior or back when you've got when you're doing the budget. So I know what's being said, and I heard some of it tonight. But I'm just saying that it just isn't happening. Now, some people might not like the decisions that are made, but like I personally made the recommendation to do the water lines and to do the tank, but I can't approve it. And I didn't approve going for the loan that we got at 1% with 50% principal forgiveness. That had to be from the council. And then the council accepts the money, puts it in the budget. We have a public hearing at that time for the budget. And then any action we take, a project that big would actually, the RFP to hire the engineers would have to be approved by council. Right now, we're doing the school and city hall. Those RFPs have to be approved by council before we can put them out to hire. And we have citizen representatives on boards that are making the decision on who to hire. And in the case of Cannon Beach Elementary, it was Barb and David Veneta.
but what I keep hearing is it's going to go to the council. I want the full process, right? Whenever you guys go for a variance, whenever you step into a wetland, I want to have this group meet, right?
That does.
Whenever you cut a tree.
It does.
Okay, so it sounds like you're objecting to the language, Bruce, and you keep talking about the council, but what you keep telling me is this is pretty much what happens, apart from the comment. Bill was raising his hand, apart from the comment that Bill had, and there's probably a little overreach in here, but Bill, go ahead.
So there seems to be, some I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but we want to make sure there's an understanding about how the municipal system works, what different parties' roles are. We start out with the charter. This is what the people said, and all power is in the city commission, except as the charter says otherwise, and that's the language from the city charter. They delegate a variety of different portions of that power. Essentially, the city manager, Bruce, is delegated the power to implement the policies that the city council adopts. He manages the city, and that's managing the public works department. He manages staff. He manages all the rest. The planning commission has a very important role, and it's laid out in 2.12020 of the city's code. And the powers and duties of the planning commission shall include the following: develop and maintain the comprehensive plan, investigate and make recommendations regarding the implementation of the comprehensive plan, prepare and review land development regulations, including not limited to zoning, subdivision, land partitioning, and make recommendations to the city council, conduct hearings, providing findings of fact, conclusions, recommendations, perform other duties relating to the city's land use regulations as may be prescribed by law, and perform other functions as indicated by city or state law or as requested by the city council. So the planning commission's role is essentially land use and other things that the city council delegates to the planning commission. There's a wide variety of things that the city does that are not land use. There's a wide variety of things that the city does that are not land use, the budget and other things. And there's also a lot of things that the city does that have implications for land use, but aren't necessarily land use. Maintaining roads, putting in water lines and sewer lines. And sometimes there's a gray area if in fact we want to put in a big transportation project. But the mundane day-to-day, how we operate the transportation system is not typically a land use matter. And that was the point I was getting at. There's a variety of things that the transportation plan looks at that really, as the code is currently set up, wouldn't come back to the planning commission. And that's what I was getting at, Mike. I think your idea is great. It's just making sure that the expectations are set about what will and won't come back to the planning commission was my point. And I think where some of that discussion with Bruce was heading is, making sure people, for lack of a better term, stay in their lanes, and that we have a functioning city, that it doesn't get wrapped up in process more than accomplishing things. At the same time, making sure there's enough process and that the citizens believe that they're being heard.
Absolutely. Can we have Bill rewrite this?
I think we can have him take a stab at it for sure.
Can you rewrite that, Bill, in a way that would make you comfortable?
I can certainly try to.
Thank you.
And that's why I made a comment. I heard Bill say that Bruce was here saying, trying to make sure everybody stays in their lanes. I'm not saying that you folks are out of your lane at all. My comments were more related to how people are talking about how the process is happening and there's no control and no public input. All those opportunities are there. And we'll do, a major project. Maybe, one person will make a comment.
Well, and that's true, but you got to understand that transportation plan has 50 pages of recommended projects, and nobody can tell what the hell they're about. So they just want a little bit of language, and nobody's trusting you. They just want a little language that says, when this happens, we'll see it again.
And
that's all we want. That's all we want to.
I understood, Mike, and thank you for explaining. And as Bill said, right now, there may or may not be a link that would necessarily take it to the planning commission. But even if it is, we'll go to the planning commission. But if there's not, it still goes through all the council process, budget process, everything else. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Jeff, did you say Karen?
I thought Karen had raised her hand. I don't know if she still has comments, and so did Ryan, and I don't know if he still has.
Okay. Karen, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bill clarified what I was going to say as far as rules and responsibilities. I just wanted to remind, I think many of the folks that are on this call and in the room were present when we did the water and wastewater master plans. But for those that were not, I would just like to remind everybody that the first level of vetting happened when those master plans were being developed. The city contracted with a engineering firm that had to vet those projects to the first level just to get the price of what it would cost us to do those projects, so that the master plan had some cost elements behind it. So that was vetting level number one. When it went through all of its myriad of approval and public input and so on and so forth, and ultimately went to council and they approved it. At that point, there was an expectation of execution because the projects had been vetted. But even before we pulled the trigger to launch any of those, the Public Works Committee had full control over giving input, deciding the prioritization of those projects. We gave it a priority 1, 2, and 3 level of importance. And so there were multiple levels of input, vetting, and it gave us plenty of opportunity to do a deep dive in those projects. And some of them were changed as a result of things that were discovered when we did the deep dive before we pulled the trigger on anything. And there were many times we had to go back to the council and consult with them before we moved forward, including the projects that we pursued loans on, as Bruce eloquently laid out for us. So I say that it is similar to the TSP, but it is also different because in the water and wastewater, we had to be able to determine the cost element that was the city was facing when they did these infrastructure improvements. And the Public Works Committee had full responsibility to give input and help the staff vet that and decide what was going to be taken forward to the council for execution. And so I would see that this would do something similar. It's just that you would be starting more so at the beginning because we haven't done a deep dive and vetted these projects. But Public Works Committee would have that role to do anything concerning our roads and public works responsibilities. But there may be some of that has to go to planning and has to go to the DRB, just like it is in today's world for us, anything that we work on. So I just wanted to clarify that. And Bill, thank you for just clarifying everybody's role, you know?
Thank you, Karen. Ryan, are you still there?
I am, but I don't think I have a comment at this time. Thanks.
Okay. It seems to me we kind of have two things. We've talked, more than that, two main things. Tell me if you guys agree. The idea that we have some language in here that puts this plan into a process that the public has more input on, that there's more of a process they understand and have the opportunity to comment on. And two, and Lisa, you brought this up, where we would maybe take off some things that we just don't want on the menu at all, just because we don't even want that on the radar at all. How do people feel about that idea?
I think it's worth going through.
Going through that?
Just, I don't know how far into the weeds we'd have to go, but one recommendation at a time, yay or nay.
Okay. It's 8:15 now. Do we want to come back and all have some suggestions as to what we think should be brought out or taken out? Or do we want to reconvene on this, come back to this next month?
I would first off say that Ryan did raise his hand, and I think this is a new one.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Other Ryan, or just a new thought?
Yeah, a new thought. Thanks. I just wanted to offer on the second point you made around looking at the TSP projects and determining which ones should move forward or not. I think we've talked a lot about the process tonight, and of the 15-ish TSPs I've been engaged on in my career, I think this community has been the most engaged on any TSP I've ever worked on. I just wanted to offer that. That we really were able to reach a lot of people. We're never able to reach everyone, right? But that's why we don't just rely on public outreach. We also rely on a project advisory committee, which includes representatives of the community who can provide a voice for some of those people who may not show up or may not add one to the discussion. So I would just caution the commission that if we remove projects that, these projects have been vetted with those groups and with the public. And so there is just that risk of potentially removing something that the public or the project advisory committee or the process has told us should be in the TSP. That's all I want to offer here.
I'm not sure.
Thank you, Ryan.
I'm not sure what the public's position is right now. I saw the poll on the comprehensive plan, and I saw a letter from somebody that was telling people how to answer questions. So quite honestly, the polling data that we've collected here is worthless.
Why don't we leave?
I also think that, I mean, I just want to make sure, Ryan, that you're not suggesting that we just take the whole thing as is or nothing. I mean, I think that we have to, I think there are certain things, and I'm not just speaking for myself either. I think that all of us have gotten lots of input from different people, and there are certain things that are not a lot, but there are certain things that are repugnant to the citizenry. And I think that we need to address those things. So I don't think, I mean, it feels like you're saying, well, we got to have everything on here, accept everything or not. I don't think that's what you meant. I hope not.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to suggest that, right? No, it's very common with TSPs, right, that we get the final list and then a couple things come off and one thing comes on. That's very typical. But what I was trying to say was just that, we've gone through a lot of process, a year plus of process, and talking with a lot of people. And so I think it just should be I would say it should be a weighty decision to remove something at this point or to add something, right? Is how I'd frame it.
That's fair. No.
I think Michael has something as well. Michael?
And Aaron.
Michael, are you there?
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate it. I'm not trying to belabor the conversation here. It seemed like we were getting to a point of at least what we're going to talk about next go around with this. So I had kind of a short list of things I just wanted to touch on here. But before I got into that, I wanted to echo what Ryan said about public involvement on this. And I would say, in addition to the survey and whether you like that or not, it happened. And I think that's, for a single survey, that's strong. I do think outside of unique hits to the website here, at one point in time we had over, and this was earlier on in the process, over 700 hits to the website. So people going back and engaging with the topic. So, and I understand how engaged Cannon Beach is as a community, and so maybe there's some clarification that needs to happen as far as what is 200 and some odd unique hits, or what is all the touch points that we had along the way relative to the other discussions that this community has. But I can say, compared to other transportation plans that we've funded over the last 10 years I've been at ODOT, this is incredibly strong interaction with the TSP. I think the expectations are high because of that. And I wanted to, and maybe this gets back to the list here, I wanted to reiterate that the TSP is a policy document, ultimately. I think when we start putting dotted lines on a map, and they cross people's property, or they cross a road, or they cross a park or something like that, people tend to think that that's the alignment of the trail. And when we do things like that, we're saying we need a connection between point A and point B, an origin and destination. And that's what we're trying to show when we have connections, or we try to show an improvement on a map. We say, we know that we need an improvement here to mitigate for whatever's going to happen over the next 20 years to still help this community align with its values. And so, it being a policy document, I think there's a lot of expectation that it is a master plan, or a refinement plan, area plan, or development plan. And certainly over the years, TSPs have gotten more detailed. And in fact, I think for a TSP, there's a good level of detail in here. And I know folks have been using this idea of a menu and I can appreciate that because I think it's a good way of reframing a prioritized list of projects in a way that still gives the community options. And I'm not sure, maybe it's just because it's, dinner-ish time, but keeping with the food thought here, I usually think of it as a recipe, and these are ingredients, and what we're trying to do is ultimately make, and I get the half-baked analogies that pop up whenever I say this, but we're trying to bake something at the end of it, and at the end you're still trying to present that piece where Cannon Beach is at the end of 20 years. Now you might swap out, you have a 4-way stop here, you have a roundabout. They both mitigate for congestion over that 20-year period, but there's other criteria that play into that the city may want to consider one versus the other, be it cost, other impacts, right-of-way impacts. But it's not necessarily an either or, and maybe it's a phasing. Maybe that roundabout moves outside the 20-year planning horizon. And the reason I mention this is because I'm getting a sense that the community and some of the members here tonight are feeling like we've just brought everything that the consultant has thought of on this process and put it into the TSP. And to Ryan's point, there's been a filter and many iterations on what you see in the plan today. And I just want folks to understand that there has been a process that has helped us funnel down to this point. And I do think even at this time, when we interact with planning commission or even city council, there's things that sometimes get bumped off the plan at that point for whatever reason. I think now is the opportunity to have that conversation, but within the context that all this process has led us up to this point. So policy document, it is goal 12 of your comprehensive plan. That's what a TSP is. So when I hear comments about will it be consistent with your comp plan, it is your comp plan. It's goal 12 of your comp plan. So it's assumed to be consistent with your comp plan. And when I say that, it's consistent with the land use identified in your comp plan. It's consistent with the other policies and other goals in your comprehensive plan. And ultimately, it's a look at that 20-year planning horizon and a set of programs, policies, projects, and studies or recommended refinement around ideas that will help mitigate for growth, change that's coming in the next 20 years, and whether or not I hear that we want to keep folks visiting the community in a way that is sustainable or more sustainable, but they're still coming. It's a public beach. And so how do we work with that, knowing that we've forecasted the growth to happen in Oregon, and it's going to happen, and folks are going to want to come to your community because it's an amazing place. And so that's what this TSP is trying to help the community is kind of have a roadmap there. And then the last thing I want to say, I hear what that language presented tonight. It's not on the screen anymore, so unfortunately I couldn't write down all of it. I get what it's trying to, the aim of it, and I do think maybe there's an opportunity for us to present some language in the TSP that does a better job at outlining the development process and the decision process that occurs already. And I think that's what staff and others have been saying tonight is that that statement isn't necessarily at odds with what is already happening, but I think there's an opportunity to communicate that to the public in a way that lets them know that, hey, this TSP is home to these policies, programs, projects, but there's a process that happens at the time of project development that allows for the community to engage on that again. And what isn't part of what's before you tonight is the implementing ordinances. I think that's happening at a later point. That's my understanding. And I think that ends up being home for a lot of this. You have language in there saying, is it a modification or a reconstruction of a roadway? It better defines what that trigger is for the type of review. And that will happen when you dig into that. What we have before us tonight is, again, at that height, that 30,000 foot level, to say, here are a couple of ingredients that will help us address what we know is coming in our community. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as clarification, and otherwise, really, really good discussion tonight. I really appreciate being part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. What do you guys think about coming back to this?
Yeah, let's come
I've
back.
heard tonight
Yeah.
multiple times, people want us to take our time.
Mhm.
I'd like to take some time with it.
Mhm.
Mickey, Aaron, Lisa, you guys good with coming back to this?
Yeah, it sounds like we'll need to, my general feeling is let's not sit on this for ages. I think we could move through this. I think we could talk about concerns next time, and let's have a goal that next time we concentrate, we come back very efficiently, ready to say for each of us, what are the points of concern? Let's hammer that out and let's get it done.
And in addition to those specific points, Bill, you'll have some revised language for us to consider?
I was hoping for.
Yes, I will work with Jeff and make sure we have start with Commissioner Bates' language and bring something that we think does a good, takes his good work and improves on it.
That was great, Mike
Thank
Bates.
you.
That was really good. That I hadn't seen it before until you just presented it, but that idea of something like that is a great idea.
Thank you, Lisa.
I also just want to throw this out to everybody. I'm really impressed with the correspondence that we had. There was a lot of really thoughtful correspondence. People had spent some time to really dig in on this, both here in the room tonight and on the website, and gave me some ideas for some things that I wouldn't want or I would want. So if you all haven't seen it, we got that information in a little different format. You have to go to the website to log in to get it, the TSP website. But if you go there, there's some really good correspondence, and it goes back quite a ways. So.
And I would recommend everyone not just look at the CannonBeachTSP.com. I'm going to say it one more time. CannonBeachTSP.com, not just the project library, not just the public comments, but in that project library is the raw survey data with all of the comments that were collected. I reiterate, this is not worthless, okay? This is real data. These are people's voices that share their comments and concerns. And maybe they didn't write a letter or an email that gets posted in the public comments, but they filled out those questionnaires that had open-ended questions and let them answer. But so that they're not, I heard it repeatedly tonight in other correspondence that this was slanted surveys or something like that. There were numerous open-ended, what else do you have to say? What would you like to say about that? What don't you see that you would like to see? Those kind, and they're every single one collected in those raw survey data that's out there in Excel spreadsheets. And so please do the public a favor. And just like Michael has said, Ryan has said, and others that have been part of this process the entire time, Randy, who has been part of this process the whole time, great comments. I mean, every one of Randy's submissions, great comments. So look at those, respect those comments, okay? And that's what I want to suggest is, as someone who has spent a good year and a half trying to get people to come forward and make comments. It is not a difficult time. I mean, it is a difficult time to get people to come and give their support to things. And I have been doing this just like Ryan and Eddie and others and Michael, this kind of planning for 30 years. This is good turnout. This is good data. And so I just want to express, it's not easy getting people out. I have looked at TSPs from all over the Oregon. You look at their public comments, go back and look at theirs and how much they got. It's small and they're huge cities. And I've done the same thing in huge cities, and we've gotten 300 for a city, 15,000. So it is not easy wherever you do this. So please respect the process and And yes, have your say, take out ones that you want and then even make amendments like Lisa or others have suggested. You may not want all of the, or get rid of all the scooters, but you don't want scooter rentals. So say that, say no scooter rentals, but reserve the right to, for people who want to do scooters or just has a personal scooter. Yeah, you want to still deal with that and manage those, because where they park, where they can ride them, you still want to have a say in that. So you want to keep some of that, but hey, yeah, other things that you just want to say no to, I totally respect that and want you to be able to voice your opinions on that. I respect the public process, and I definitely respect my elected and appointed officials who have given their time and energies. And I just want you to say, yes, spend some time and focus, because I already have 5 applications for next month's meeting. And so we're getting at that point where we're going to have to kind of slow, say 2 or 3 at a time, because it's just going to be too full of an agenda. And so we're going to have to start asking people to hold on a month or 2 before we do their applications.
Sure.
And some pretty, weighty stuff. So I want you guys to, stay focused and refreshed and come back, ready to go. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So to the people in the room and the people listening, we are looking at your comments. They help shape this discussion. It's not a discussion happening quickly. It's happening thoughtfully. Please keep your comments coming in. Even if you've commented already and you have new items, we will look at those next time. So let's move on to our tree report. Are there any comments on the tree report?
Good work. Planted 19 trees. Where?
Thanks to Trevor.
Where?
Thanks to Trevor. Yeah.
Trevor, where do you plant them?
Yeah. I don't know if he's on, but yeah.
That's good work.
We've planted 6 of them during the 12 days birthday with the Cannon Beach Academy.
Cool. Where did we find space? I just want
At Kenai Street
to. Okay.
by the beach access.
Okay.
And then we planted 4 more in the reserve. Has part of, by the cache site, as part of a blackberry project.
Oh yeah, I heard we cut down some back there, right? Some blackberry, took some bramble out.
We took a lot of
Cool.
that, yeah, and planted trees instead.
Good.
So
Nice.
That's all I had to say. Good work. Trevor, good work. Stay out there. Okay.
Any other comments on the tree report? Okay, moving on. Any update on planning items?
Yes, code audit continues. There's a village character survey that's out there that's been spoken of a few times here. And the mayor gave a letter on that. And so please feel free, citizens, to go out and do that. It's available on our website, the link to that. Let's see if other items, anything else you can think of? Yeah, I think that's the main thing, code audit. And, I think school project, school rejuvenation project, that's also moving forward.
I actually have a question about the code audit. Do you mind? I've seen a couple properties lately where every tree has been cut down, and it's not clear to me that, I'm not there, that it had to be, but I just wonder if we could move up that tree ordinance and maybe take it on a parallel track with, I feel like our forest is disappearing, but with the priority 1 items. Could we do that? I'm willing to put more time.
I mean, like a track 2 type of.
Well, I don't know. What's track 1?
Track 1 we've already done.
Okay, yeah, track 2.
2.1.
So I think that's part of the next discussion for the next joint session is what are the ones we want to collect in track 2 and move forward immediately, and then what can wait for the full code audit.
How will that proceed? Will that be the consulting firm providing us recommendations and then us taking them with ordinance language, correct?
Yeah. So what they would do is suggest, these, say 3 items, whether it's house size, trees, whatever that you feel that are the main things you want to work on. those would be the next ones that would then come before you guys into work session.
Definitely house size, but trees also, because I think it goes hand in hand, as we're seeing.
Okay.
Lisa.
Yeah, I
Lisa
just,
did have it.
I have a question that, just a question in general for Jeff, because I don't understand why we don't post building permits on site like other cities do, where they can be seen by people passing by. And why can't we post building applications on our website? I know they do that at the county level through Excella, which is
We do that as well. We do
Okay.
that as well.
So what's the code for Cannon Beach with the building applications? For Clatsop County, it's 186, is if I wanted to see certain things in a certain township and range.
Well,
What,
you just put in the address.
Beach for the search.
Yeah.
So if you go to the public site and just put in Cannon Beach,
And there's
all
a,
the building permits will come up for Cannon Beach.
And what site is that, Lisa?
it's
Excella.
on, if you go on our website as well, I'll share my screen right now.
Oh, no, Jeff, I don't mean the list of the building permits. I mean the actual application, to be able to see the actual application.
I guess I'm confused at what you're asking for, the actual application.
Oh,
That is
let's-
a building permit application.
Okay, I know, I've seen the list of all of the applications that you have that have been listed. You know, if somebody applies for a building permit, you can see that they have applied for it and it's under review. But what you can't see is what the actual substance of the application itself.
Yes, but, and that's because, well, there's a couple things on that. So, jurisdictions that usually do that have electronic plan review. And so they ask for everything, and it's usually in their ordinances that they ask for everything through an electronic submission. Okay, we don't have that in Cannon Beach yet. We are going to that in July. That's our goal. And so that's a process for us also to get the software component, train on that and up to speed on that from the plan and review side of things. And so, yes, we are doing that in July. And so all of these things you're speaking of, yes, we're in the process of doing. And so, and like that, the permits you can find on the Acela site, we don't have electronic permits, plans on there because we don't have electronic plan review yet. And so that process would take, and that's why we ask you to go through the public records request for such things, because if you're wanting them sent to you, that means often, in most cases, we have to scan those documents in. It takes us time and energies and resources to do that. That's why that goes through that public records request system. Now, if you're just wanting to come in and look at plans, yes, you do that, but then that's also needs to be in a timed manner because we are working and trying to review those documents. All the different departments have to review those those plans. And, so it has to fit with that as well. So it's that's why we want to move as much as we can to electronic submission, electronic portals. That was not done for 5 years before I came and it was not attempted. And I put that in motion for us to do because no one, you would have to come in and do a hard copy of everything.
Right, that's great. No, I think that's
trying
great.
to do that. Just, you have to understand it's a process and we're not equipped to do that right now.
I understand. It just, I just want to, make a vote for the process, because it's a great thing to be able to go on a website and see all the building plans and everything and have all your questions answered about someone's application, not just the fact that they're doing one and that it's under review. And I understand that it must be a very complicated thing to get all those things up. And I look forward to when Cannon Beach has that site available.
Me too. I honestly, I laugh at it because we did this 20 years ago in Idaho. And so, I mean, I'm very concerned that, it's impossible to kind of get things through and processed because of that. And so it's much better for just you, for the public and for us. So
Right.
really look forward to it. And our clients out there, the development community and the contractors, maybe kicking and screaming at first, but they love it now. So it's also great because they can call in on their mobile or text in and get their inspections and find out that themselves. So it's a great all around thing. So.
Okay, thanks.
Does anyone have any items for the good of the order?
I actually just had a quick clarification. Did I hear you correctly, Jeff, that there are 5 applications that we're putting off for next meeting to
No,
prioritize
sorry,
the
Mickey,
TSP
no.
discussion?
Yeah, no, sorry, Mickey. Not putting off, not at all. No, we
Okay.
have 5 applications that have come in requesting to be on our next, the next available agenda. And so we're hoping to do as many as we can is what I'm saying. So
Okay.
we're not putting anything off right
Okay.
now.
I'm
Okay.
glad to hear that.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I guess so. The next available agenda would be June's planning commission meeting, correct?
It is, and we will do our best to get as many on there as possible.
And if we would have disposed of or adopted the TSP today, we would for sure have been able to get all 5 on the agenda?
I can't guarantee anything, Aaron. Sorry. I
Fair
wish I
enough.
could do that. No.
There would have been a much better chance of at least a couple of them getting
Well,
on the agenda.
Aaron, I think that's a great point, and it definitely something I, would love to speak to you guys about in a work session because, I've worked in jurisdictions that go till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, 5-hour meetings, and I know Bill loves that. And he's one to do that. But no, I have worked where there are full agendas and they have to work through these things. And it is a lot of work, but I see this coming and, I want us to be as timely and efficient as we can. And I know Mickey spoke about that as well, staying focused and staying on, coming with those targets. And I think we have to respect that because we do see our queue starting. And Aaron, this is the first time we've had that since I've been here, really a big queue. I mean, I think we've had 1 or 2 meetings where we may have had 5 applications, but really very rarely over the last 4 years.
We have typically tried, and it hasn't always worked, to not go much further than 9.
Yeah.
Talk about whether we do that or not. Personally, I start to get a little fuzzy after hearing enough of this and needing to think about it. But that doesn't mean we couldn't be more aggressive. Do people have thoughts on how long we're meeting for?
We should meet whatever it takes. I told Jeff I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be Zooming next week or next month. So
When you say whatever it takes, do you want
whatever it takes. Yeah. If we
Put it 1 o'clock?
gotta do. I'm retired.
Anybody else? Because we're going to vote for 1 o'clock here.
I'll go.
I do not recommend 1 o'clock.
I
go.
will not vote for that one. Okay, so I guess maybe the best thing we can do is just kind of consider the workload and at the beginning of the meeting, talk about what you have in front of you and what we feel like we can accomplish.
Yeah.
And I definitely will be in touch, Clay, talking about these things.
Okay.
Coming agenda.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we can dig in if we need to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that last point there, we will adjourn the meeting. Till next time.
Fantastic. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Good job, Clay.